thank you for coming tonight. I'm really honored to be giving this presentation. This is one of my more favorite topics that I share with congregations throughout the WELS. So tonight, we're going to be talking about shaping responsible behavior. My name is Julie Straseski. I'm a therapist with Christian Family Solutions. I've been with CFS since 2014. This topic of responsibility is important to me because I have 3 kids of my own, and because of my work in therapy. I have done lots of counseling with teenagers, making that transition from childhood to adulthood. And I've seen the value of learning to be responsible. If there are other parents listening right now, other parents of younger kids especially, like you, I do not have every single aspect of parenting perfectly figured out all the time. I'm on this journey right along with you. And I'm honored, though, to share some work I've done going over the research and preparing for this presentation and drawing on my own experience as a counselor. I really think this material is valuable, and I pray it will give each of you tonight some information, some tools, and some confidence as you work with the children in your lives. So tonight, we're going to briefly discuss definitions of responsibility, and then we're going to dive more deeply into why should we shape responsibility, and then ways that we can foster responsibility in our children. My goals, whenever I do a parenting presentation, is to provide ideas, get discussions going, either in this format right now or with your spouse, with other teachers or people who are shaping your kids along with you, to get those discussions going. As you listen, I also hope that you might just consider or highlight 1 or 2 things that you can try applying in your life with your kid in the next week or 2. It's not realistic or successful if any of us would attempt to overnight revamp our entire parenting strategy. That doesn't work in the long term. A few small changes that we're consistent with, that's found to be much more effective. Also, if you're here attending a presentation like this, I have no doubt that you're doing a lot of things well already. So as you're looking for 1 or 2 things that you might want to implement in your parenting, also take note of the things that you're doing well and the things that God is blessing in your journey with your children right now. Looking at the word responsibility, I found a few different definitions. The first definition is the ability to act independently and make decisions without authorization. Or maybe you prefer the second definition, the state of being accountable or to blame for something. And then finally, another just slightly different take, responsibility is the state of having a duty to deal with something. I really sort of like, especially those underlined portions of each definition. If a child learns to be responsible, they learn how to act independently, to make decisions by themselves. They take on accountability for tasks. And then, of course, that final underlined word, they have duties. They have things that are on their shoulders. As we all know, kids are a huge blessing and a huge responsibility for us. One of our roles as parents is to teach them this. Kids don't naturally have the practical skills or the internal skills to grab hold of responsibility. It's something that we have to nurture within them. So, why shape responsibility? We want to foster responsibility in our children, first of all, because it's a spiritual calling. It's part of us being good stewards of our roles as parents. We also want to shape responsibility because kids need it. Again, it's not something innate. It's something that needs to be taught and practiced. And then we want to shape responsibility because there are many benefits in teaching our kids to be accountable, to have tasks and duties that are on their shoulders. These benefits are practical, and then I'm going to speak at length about these other two benefits that you see here. There are benefits for a child's mental health when they learn how to be responsible. And then there are benefits in how a child, how an adolescent develops a relationship with or practices surrounding technology. Those two pieces are just really important in the work I do as a counselor, come up very, very frequently in the research in putting together this presentation. And I really hope and pray that there's some growing that we all can do in these areas tonight. So as I said, first and foremost, we look to Scripture, we look to God and His will for our lives in parenting. So parents are trainers entrusted by God. Proverbs 22, verse 6, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. Again, God uses us to bless and to shape children. Another verse from Proverbs, we learned that irresponsibility brings sadness and pain. Proverbs 5, the evil deeds of a man ensnare him. The cords of his sin hold him fast. He will die for lack of discipline, led astray by his own great folly. Scripture is full of examples of God acting as a parent to his children, commanding them to be responsible, to take on a task. My 5-year-old just learned today about Moses and the burning bush. There's the story of Abraham being called by God, or even the story of Mary in the New Testament. God called his people to be responsible. He gave them tasks as well. Now, this verse from Proverbs sounds very harsh, but just like earthly parents with our children, God wants us to avoid this type of fate that can happen when a person does not learn to be disciplined, does not learn to have accountability. Also, when we are teaching our kids to be responsible, it's more than just checking chores off of a list. It's more than just completing said tasks. Part of responsibility is doing things in a way that is full of faithfulness, that is full of virtue. When we teach our children to be responsible with the way that they treat others, with how they conduct themselves, we are helping them develop, as you see in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Responsibility in our conduct is part of how we live out our faith and teach our children to do the same. As you see in Matthew 5, teaching these virtues is also a way that we witness to the world. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. We talked about the spiritual piece, right? Why else do we shape responsibility? Because, again, children need it. Once more, I just want to kind of reiterate, responsibility does not automatically develop as children grow older. We can't complete every task for our kids through high school and send them off to college and expect them to know how to do the laundry, how to make tacos, how to work through conflict, how to, again, embody those fruits of the Spirit. Responsibility is a learned skill. It is developed over time through practice, modeling, and guidance. Maybe some of you read the Dr. Abby column in the newspaper. I'm not sure how old the crowd is, but I definitely read that. So I like this quote from Dr. Abby here. If you want children to keep their feet on the ground, put some responsibility on their shoulders. There are just numerous benefits to responsibility. I mean, we all know a lot of them, but I was really surprised when I was putting this together at just the laundry list of ways that this is beneficial for our kids. As you can see here, there are benefits in work and school, and there are benefits in our children's relationships and their future lives. We're going to start with those first two categories for now. The practical benefits of responsibility. I think I'll let you read that list for yourself, but this worked better in person the last time I gave this presentation. But, you know, raise your hand if you don't like the sound of this list. If, improved work ethic, learning how to be independent and accountable, not really important to me as a parent. Of course not. One major goal of parenthood is to socialize our kids, prepare them for the world so they eventually don't need us, right? And I think one great thing about this list is that it really carries over in the areas of school, work, relationships, and preparing them for adulthood. There are also benefits in responsibility for looking at the last two items on this list that I have here, for mental health and for a healthy relationship with technology. So I mentioned I'm passionate about these last 2 points. Why are they so important? First of all, because unfortunately, mental health concerns are prevalent in the country for young people. I have to lay some groundwork here, and I know these statistics can be daunting, but we need to know what we're facing, right? And it's far from hopeless. I think we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of research, and many supports for kids as they deal with mental health concerns. As you can see there, 20% of teenagers, this was in 2023, 20% of teenagers had a diagnosed mental health disorder, and then 17% of children, ages 5 through 12, had this mental health disorder. I apologize if this chart may be a bit hard to see. It just shows the trends from 2016 to 2023. In the top level is combined, all mental health disorders. Down below is anxiety, that's the red squares. And then we have behavioral issues. And then the bottom point would be depression. Now, there's a bit of encouragement here. Like I said, this is not hopeless information. Looking at 3 of the 4, the numbers are actually starting to go down a little bit. Maybe the reduction in stigma, the increased services that are being provided for young people are having a benefit. Anxiety is still increasing though. It looks like the rate has slowed down, but I would like to talk about anxiety more in depth because out of all of the mental health disorders, the link between responsibility and decreased anxiety is strong. Before we explore that, it's important to touch on briefly what causes anxiety. Now, first of all, is biology. While the numbers are rising, anxiety is not new, right? Everybody worries. Anxiety becomes an issue when it rises to the point of interfering with daily life, of causing hopelessness in an individual, being very, very difficult to manage, affecting work, school, and relationships. So this first point, biology, many people are born predisposed to anxiety, but there's more. Also, life events, specifically traumatic life events, are correlated with an individual developing mental health disorders, including anxiety. A big one that surprised me initially in looking at this topic was parenting styles of individuals in around my generation, millennials, probably some Gen X as well. Wonder if you've heard of the term lawnmower parenting. So when my husband goes to mow the backyard, before he fires up the lawnmower, he walks around and he makes sure that all of the bubbles, the chalk, the shoes and socks. What else do my kids leave out there? Sand toys. He goes through and makes sure everything is clear, so his path is smooth as he mows the lawn, back and forth into neat lines. That is really good for mowing a lawn and not breaking your kid's favorite toy or the lawnmower. But that approach is actually really harmful when it comes to parenting. We all have the impulse to remove obstacles, to remove hardship, to remove discomfort in our children's lives. But when we remove every obstacle, our kids don't learn how to develop resilience. They don't learn how to deal with conflict in relationships. They don't learn they're capable of problem solving. They don't have the chance to practice all these things. And then when later in life an obstacle presents itself, they don't feel prepared. And this feeling unprepared increases anxiety in young people. So one of our college level terms for the day, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is an individual's belief in their ability to act in the ways necessary to reach specific goals. Basically, if a kid has self-efficacy, they believe, I can do this. I'm capable of overcoming an obstacle. I'm capable of reaching a goal. What does this have to do with anxiety? Again, if a child believes I can overcome an obstacle, they are less likely to feel overwhelmed by worry, overwhelmed by fear of the unknown, because they believe they have skills to cope. Increased self-efficacy is correlated with coping ability. It's correlated with decreased anxiety and decreased depression. And it's correlated with a healthy sense of control. Control is something I really discuss a lot with my counseling clients. We discuss a challenging situation, and I always try to provide empathy and a listening ear. And at the same time, the conversation often goes to, what can you control? And then how are you going to do it? It's the same with our kids. We as parents can help shape self-efficacy by giving kids age-appropriate responsibilities. They'll gain confidence and they'll gain independence. When those things go up, what happens to anxiety? We know it goes down. I really like this verse from 2 Corinthians. Anytime we're feeling like we can't do it, anytime we feel overwhelmed by a task, we have 2 Corinthians is full of reminders that God is the one who ultimately provides this self-efficacy, this ability to achieve a goal, this ability to work hard and not give up. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 5 says, not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. Back to responsibility as being a spiritual calling to instill responsibility in our children, right? When we point our kids to Christ, that can remind them they're not doing this alone. They have somebody really powerful and really loving in their corner. So, back to some more benefits of responsibility. Again, as you read through this list, raise your hand if you don't want these in your children. All of these factors are protective against developing mental health disorders. But then, if a child is diagnosed with something like depression or anxiety, these are all huge coping skills, huge coping resources. If a kid has that bottom point, stronger relationship, or that top point, resilience, they are able to cope with mental health disorders at a more successful level. So teaching our kids responsibility has been associated with all of these things. It's a huge gift when we think about we're not only shaping how our child is able to complete tasks, but really how they learn to cope with emotional difficulties and learn that they are capable of coming out the other side. I said that there would be one more contributor to anxiety here, This is going to be the technology piece. Before we do, I know I'm sharing a lot of information and just the areas that we've covered so far, why to shape responsibility, looking at some of the benefits, looking at this mental health piece. If anyone has either a question or a comment, I'd love to take them at this time before we go on. And, obviously I can't see or hear you now, so I'll just give it a few more seconds. But if no one has one now, that's fine. Again, I'll try to provide another opportunity later. But if you think of questions at any point, just dive in, and I'd love to discuss. So I think we'll move forward for now, at least. A huge contributor to anxiety for young people today is technology. The more I read, the more I research, the clearer it is that our kids' relationship to things like smartphones and social media is a huge predictor of how anxious they are. So smartphones specifically are very addictive. It's hard for an adult to put their phone away, to stop scrolling. Imagine being 13 years old, 10 years old. The brain is not fully developed. That impulse control is weaker. That is a very difficult task to ask a child to stop and to limit their time on an iPhone, any type of a smartphone. Another kind of college word for us today under that category of smartphones is that this concept of displacement. So when a child spends 5 hours a day on their phone, that's 5 hours that other healthier activities are displaced. You can think about face-to-face socializing with friends, exercise, time outside, time engaging in a hobby that makes them feel productive, gives them a sense of accomplishment, time spent in prayer, in Bible study. All of those things are much better for our kids' mental health than time spent on a screen. Too much time spent on a screen means those things are not happening enough. Looking at the social media piece here, I'm not saying anything too earth-shattering that you don't know, but it's really worth repeating. With social media, especially for young girls, boys deal with it too, but young girls scrolling through Instagram are being compared and are comparing themselves based on their physical appearance, based on how many likes or how many hearts their picture has compared to someone else. And that ties in with self-worth in just a really yucky, unhealthy way. Also with social media, there's no escape from challenging interpersonal dynamics that happen at school. I don't want to torture anybody too much, but if you would kind of go back in your mind to a rough day that you had in middle school or high school, maybe you're dealing with a breakup, dealing with feeling just on the outside of your group of friends. I hope not bullying, but we know that's unfortunately a part of these years for a lot of individuals. It's likely that when you were a kid, you had that hard day at school, and then you went home. You were still sad, but you had a break from those individuals, from those dynamics. For many young people today, if they're bullied at school, they're being bullied at home through social media. A lot of young people who are going through a breakup, they go home and just with a couple little taps of their thumb, they can see what their ex is doing and spend too much time focused on their ex. If a person feels excluded at school, they can go on their Instagram and they can see ways that they're continuing to be excluded or even inside jokes that they don't understand. If I were to recommend any resource for you tonight, it would be the book, The Anxious Generation. It's by a psychologist, a very accomplished researcher. He has drawn conclusions about this link between anxiety and technology, just at a very clear how do I say this? It's very clear that these are not just correlations, these are not just his opinion. There's research-backed evidence that kids are more anxious, partly because of the prevalence of social media, the prevalence of smartphones. So this author in his book, one of his main kind of theses is that we have made the mistake of overprotecting our kids in real life and underprotecting them in the online world. Again, a definite link between changing technology and worsened mental health for young people today. Here, a couple points of food for thought from the book. There's another college term for us, prevalence inflation. The idea of prevalence is how common something is, and then inflation, something getting bigger. One interesting aspect about mental health content on social media is that when kids are constantly consuming content about trauma, anxiety, neurodivergence, from somebody who's not an expert, it's a fellow teenager, they're much more likely to think that they have this disorder, even if they don't, even if what they're experiencing are just symptoms of being a normal teenager. So that is one disadvantage of giving our kids unlimited access to social media. The author also makes the point, or the analogy, of a trip to Mars. If you knew that your child had the opportunity to be on this pioneering expedition to Mars, full of fellow teenagers, they don't know of any benefits. They know a lot of risks or a lot of potential risks, and they've never tested this before. But all their friends are going to be there. Would you send them? Probably not. A few more brief facts about this age that we're in with technology. Tweens spend 6 hours per day, excuse me, using digital media, and then about 25% of teens report they are constantly connected. I actually think that number is a bit low. Not sure if you have teens in your own houses right now. You can answer that for yourselves. It's also just really important to focus on, again, when our children are spending large amounts of time on their smartphones, on social media, they're not sleeping enough, or they're not sleeping as well. And decreased sleep, decreased quality of sleep is another clear factor in a child's mental health or a child's declining mental health. Now, I know a lot of this information can be a bit disheartening, maybe a bit scary. On this screen, you can see the risks, but I just want to focus on that word excessive. I'm not saying to go throw your smartphone out the window. I'm not throwing mine out yet. I might someday. But we're not shooting for perfection. We're not shooting for going back 100 years. We're looking at moderation. We're looking at limiting or waiting until later in life for our kids to use certain technologies. The type of technology, the type of screen time matters a great deal as well. Our kids having family movie night with us or watching quality educational TV shows, that doesn't have nearly the same, risks or downfalls as social media or a smartphone at a young age. And again, just to make sure I'm being clear, I'm not saying all tech is bad. Some of us met our spouses online. But it's just, we need to know what we're facing so we can teach our kids how to have a healthy relationship with technology. So as we're summing up this section here, looking at all the benefits of responsibility, earlier we talked about the practical ones. We talked about preparing our kids for adulthood. Teaching our kids to be responsible can also help protect against mental health concerns. And one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids in this day and age is teaching them responsibility with technology. I hope I've illustrated the close link between the mental health piece and the tech piece. Again, I know some of this can feel intimidating, but there's good news with this link, because if we can help our child in the tech area have a healthier relationship, a more limited relationship with certain kinds of tech, that is almost guaranteed to improve their mental health. We're gonna end tonight, we're gonna conclude this discussion with a whole bunch of hope, a whole bunch of resources and tools and guidelines that we as parents can use. We're gonna talk about ways to shape responsibility. Before I do that, I'm gonna take a sip of my water and again, just open up another pause, another break if there's questions or comments from the group. Again, no pressure, but I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Happy to, if I can clarify anything or answer a question. I really love this picture. That was our marketing team put the pictures in here. I just think this is so cute. I'm going to move forward, but again, just jump in anytime if there's something you want to discuss or something you want to ask. So, ways to shape responsibility. Come on here. There we go. How do we shape responsibility with our children? Through tasks, through ongoing discipline, through ongoing modeling, and again, through helping our kids with practical ways to approach technology. Chores, they are good. Let me know if you want this video recording so you can play that segment for your kids at home on repeat. Chores are good. Choosing one or two small, age-appropriate chores for your kid is a great place to start when it comes to shaping responsibility. Things to keep in mind when we're doing this is to start out early, to keep our chores age-appropriate, to introduce a variety, not only to give them a wide range, but, keep things fresh, keep boredom from setting in. We also have to keep expectations reasonable. Our kids will feel frustrated and we'll feel defeated if we're looking for perfection in sweeping the floor, perfection in listening to us the first time, right? With chores, it's also helpful to make it a family affair. After dinner, how about everyone spends 5 or 10 minutes clearing the table, washing some dishes, vacuuming or sweeping under the table. And then make it really clear with your kids so that they're set up for success. Exactly how many toys do you want put away? Exactly which portion of the floor do you want mopped? And so on. So if you're looking for one or two things that you might try putting into practice at home, this could be a great place to start. Maybe you'll just ask your littler kid to take on one of these chores. At first, you'll do it with them, then you'll kind of step back and supervise, and then eventually they'll be able to do it independently. Happy to hear other ideas from the group at any time. For kids who are a bit older, it might look like, loading the dishwasher, putting away some groceries, making a meal, doing the laundry, walking the dog, doing yard work. We were doing lots of raking today at our house, or helping make dinner. Another major avenue to help our kids foster responsibility is with homework. Excuse me. So why do I talk about having an appropriate place and a structured time? One major reason is because research shows that with repetition, if our kids have a usual place that they learn to keep neat and clean and a certain time, that helps their brain kind of realize, this is my study space. It helps the brain concentrate and focus more quickly. The third point here, remember it's your child's homework, not yours. This is a win all around because if we have this approach, our kid learns responsibility and independence, and we get a break. I actually think that if you have kids in the grade school age range, grade school is actually a great place for kids to take ownership of homework, with parents not always being as involved. Lots of caveats there. It depends on their age. It depends on what you know their capability is at this time. But if we can step back, our kids are going to take it on themselves, and sometimes they're going to succeed, and they're going to get that self-efficacy, right? That confidence, like, I'm capable of doing this. And there will be times where our kids fail, but I'd actually like to challenge that word. Is it a failure if a kid learns, if a kid does homework by themselves and they get a few problems wrong? Maybe. Also, grade school is a pretty low stakes place to practice and to learn how they need to work through problems. I don't think a lot of Ivy League schools are looking at third or fourth grade report cards, right? Kids can learn cause and effect through taking on homework by themselves. They learn, okay, this is what happens if I play all night, if I do video games all night, and try to spend 5 minutes cramming in my homework. Do I like this consequence, or do I need to change some things around? We can also help our kids through school and elsewhere try out different activities that they can help them learn to be responsible. And also, they can be healthy outlets for being creative, for socializing, for developing some individuality. Maybe you have multiple kids and one of them really gets into basketball, then the next sibling comes along and they're more into tennis. It helps them become individuals with their own strengths and their own interests. All this being said, technology, oh yes, also maybe a little surprising that I have that word technology on there after the things I've been sharing. You know, I think there's wonderful examples of coding camps, of things like robotics, where kids can learn, again, tech's not going away, they can learn how to develop skills, and they can learn how to use these things to feel accomplished, to build something that can be used into the future. Now, all this being said, I do think we have to balance involvement in activities with free time and free play. One big temptation we have in our current culture, in the US and elsewhere, is to overschedule. Developmentally, though, kids need time to play, even older kids. They need time to be bored. They need time to safely and appropriately have time with their peers where they're not being directly supervised by adults. Again, this depends on age, this depends on their maturity level, as you know, but kids do not develop, back to the idea of lawnmower parenting, they do not develop socially or in terms of responsibility as well if we as parents are supervising every second and if we're jumping in to fix every problem, right? We can also help our kids learn to be responsible through service. These are just a few examples for you to think through if there's one or two things you want to try. If you look at this list, think of what your kids would be learning. Developing empathy, developing life skills, and building relationships. If you're looking for a way to have your kid be involved in the neighborhood, whether it's shoveling, mowing lawns, baking cookies, you'll notice that not only would they be developing responsibility, they'd be getting exercise, getting time socializing, learning a skill. Healthy behaviors are often grouped together. Maybe you're looking for a way for your kid to be involved in church and to develop, you know, a sense of accountability, a sense of accomplishment in that venue. One idea is you could even include serving at church or serving in the neighborhood on your family's chore chart as something that your kid is responsible for each week. Serving in the community is another option. This can be done with friends, as a family, or through the school. Shifting gears a bit here, if we're going to foster responsible behavior in our children, discipline has to be a part of the discussion. We as parents need to help our children learn and choose respectful behavior and kindness, and we have to help them learn how to make wise choices. Discipline is defined as training that corrects, molds, or perfects. We need to start from a place of love and respect. Now, that doesn't mean that rules don't matter. That doesn't mean that we ignore consequences at the expense of love and respect. There's a lot of parenting, a focus in parenting right now is really on gentle parenting, respectful parenting, empathy, and I think there's a lot of good stuff there, but we cannot throw away the baby with the bathwater. We need to have a foundation of love and respect so our children know that our desire is to help them and to love them. And we need to teach cause and effect through choices and consequences. It's not either or. It's both that love and respect and the rules. Again, this has to be at the foundation. We can be focused on our kids' emotions. We can show that we are connected and that we care about them. We can do this in different ways, showing that unconditional love throughout the day. Love by listening. Maybe that means you're really paying attention to what your kids' love language is, and you're making sure that you fill them up in that way. Know your child individually and show that you care about things that interest them, and that you care not just because they're your kid, but because they are Asher, they are Gabriel, they are Matilda, they are an individual. Again, discipline has to involve choices, it has to involve consequences. Sometimes those might be natural. What happens if you eat too much Halloween candy? What happens if you keep bugging your brother all night long? Totally hypothetical examples, not based on my 3- and 5-year-old boys. Sometimes we can use wisdom and allow natural consequences, but of course there will be times where we need to implement a timeout, losing a reward, losing a privilege, and things like that. When we give them choices, it helps kids, again, take accountability and take ownership. Maybe we allow our kid to have the option. Do you want to get your homework done now or after dinner? It's up to them, but they may learn the hard way if they wait until after dinner that they miss out on TV time. They miss out on a game of kickball with their neighbors. This final point here, responsibility leads to freedom. Again, if kids get their chores accomplished quickly, then they have more free time to play. But this is another thing that we can intentionally give as well. Just like we can give consequences, we can give extra freedom to a kid who is doing well with their tasks. We can give them a later bedtime, an outing with friends as an incentive, showing that we see their growth in responsibility. Again, ultimately, we look at what God's word says as our guide. It's certainly a guide when it comes to disciplining our children. For these commands are a lamp. This teaching is a light. And the corrections of discipline are the way to life. God disciplines us because he loves us. It's the same way for us with our kids too. Another way that we teach our kids to be responsible is through our own actions. Do as I say, not as I do, doesn't really work. We need to work on being on time, keeping our promises, and working hard, because those actions speak louder than telling our kids 1,000 times to do those things. This fourth point, technology. Again, it's hard for us as adults too to put the phone away, to limit our time on social media, to delete the Facebook app off of our phones. But we as parents need to do heavy lifting in this area of tech because, again, it's so addictive and it's very challenging for kids to have a healthy relationship if we're not starting it with ourselves. Also, these final 2 points here, again, part of responsibility is that we are carrying out our tasks with love, that we are reflecting Christ's love in our lives. So we as parents, we need to work on how we manage our own emotions. We won't do that perfectly, but then we can model repentance. We can model repair when there's been a disagreement or when we've just messed up. We can, using Christ as an example, teach our kids how to work through an interaction like that, teaching them to lead with kindness and love. Also, as parents, it's self-care and balance I think these things are important. I think it's true that they're good for us. And it kind of makes me laugh as a parent because it's so hard. And I think balance is not always a very realistic goal. We're going to be tired. We're going to be overwhelmed because it is a task that asks so much of us, practically with our time, but also with our energy and with our emotions. So I'm not asking anybody to spend your entire week in self-care. I'm not asking you to shoot for perfection. I'm saying, are there small ways that we can show our children that things on this list are important to us? Do they see us working at things like eating well, like getting some good sleep? Do they see mom or dad has a hobby or they have something that they really feel accomplished when they do well? And is that something that can get them thinking, what do I want that to be when I'm all grown up? Can our kids at times see us relaxing? Again, it's not realistic to say it's always going to be an hour of this every day. Kudos to you if you are doing that. But it's good for kids to see that we know rest was important to God. It is important to God. It's good for us. And also that our worth is not in our productivity. Our worth is in Christ. We do all these things, all of our tasks, out of love for Him. But then also, it is okay and good to read a book, to spend time with friends, of course, to spend time in God's Word and Bible study, things like that. And then hopefully our kids can see us using social support to work through challenges, to get help along the way. So back to this point of technology. Again, I know it can feel a little scary, but this researcher whose book I read and other things that I've come across have really provided good tips, good guidance in how we as parents can cope with the state of technology today. If you're looking for one or two things to try changing in your day-to-day schedule, your day-to-day lives with your family, maybe try one of these. Unplugged time, phone-free meals, phone-free bedrooms, having really a specific time each day or each week that is family fun time. And then even turning devices off when we're not using them, because again, they're so addictive that even if it's there, it's hard to completely ignore it and tune it out. So if we can, again, model for our kids a more full separation, that's for their benefit and ours too. Maybe you and your spouse, you and another parent want to explore different parental controls. These are things that can help us monitor online activity, maybe things like a locator or a screen time limit for your kid based on their age. And then that final point here, we want to have conversations with our kids about all of this, but about that safety piece, right? Making sure that they're not sharing confidential information online. The Anxious Generation, the book that has been so formative for me in this topic, there's also a website as well that has a lot of the key points. Jonathan Haidt has 4 new norms that he suggests will help with mental health, will help with healthy development and socialization. He suggests, number 1, no smartphones before high school. Number 2, no social media before age 16. Number 3, phone-free schools. And then number 4, more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Again, I'm not suggesting that we immediately change everything, but I'm asking us to think of what are small changes we could make. Is there at least one item on this list that we can commit to? And one way that we can do that, make these changes or commitments, is through collective action by working together with fellow parents. We are nervous, we might appear judgmental or offend others if we make a change regarding technology, but it's very likely other parents are concerned too. What can we try doing? Is it just having a conversation with fellow parents? Or is it something more formal, like reaching out to your school principal, to your PTA, to another organization or group? Maybe it's sending a text or mentioning something at a gathering. I've been thinking a lot about social media and smartphones. Can a group of us just get together and see if there's something we want to commit to, see if other people have similar concerns? And the goal is just to find at least something small that you all can commit to together. There's a lot of reasons why this is good, but one of the big ones is maybe obvious. It's really hard to be the only kid without a smartphone, the only kid who's not on social media. If there's a large group, it's much easier. And the kids can all complain about us together. I know, again, this is maybe not earth-shattering, but it's important just to remember again, teaching our kids when it comes to online, not everything is true that they're seeing. Not everyone is trustworthy. Don't share anything personal, right? If something seems creepy, it probably is, and tell a trusted adult right away. I like the idea of consequence-free sharing with a parent. What that might mean is, apart from technology, let's say your 15-year-old ends up at a party where there's alcohol. Establishing with them beforehand, hey, if you're in an unsafe situation or a place you know that you shouldn't be, call me or text me, and I am not going to punish you. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to say, I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you could trust me. And how can we take steps to make sure this doesn't happen again? Can we do something similar with technology? That our kids know mom and dad's immediate response is not going to be to fly off the handle, to take away TV time, to take away friend time for a month, but is going to be, thank you for telling me, now let's figure this out together. So I know I talked about staying away from the kids' homework sometimes, but sometimes we need our own homework too. As I said at the beginning, I'd love for you to reflect on this presentation and give yourself credit for what you're already doing well. Praise God for the wins that He's given you as a parent, because it's hard. Give yourself a pat on the back for what you're doing well. And then, do you want to choose one task for your child that you're going to ask of them in the next week? A new chore, a new responsibility at church, and then think through, how are you going to ask them to do this and when? And then maybe choose one small change for yourself. Is it that idea of modeling balance and self-care? Is it with your discipline style? Do you notice I'm leaning a little hard on the rules, but forgetting that baseline of unconditional love? Or am I really good at the connection? Am I really good at providing that safe place, but I've been a little too lax on boundaries, lax on consequences? Or is the small change that you want to make something related to your relationship with technology? And then maybe you want to look at Who am I accountable to? I apologize. St. John's was the last school that I gave this presentation to. But maybe you're speaking with your with staff members at your school or at your church. Maybe you have a small group established, or you can touch base with a friend or with a spouse. I know as I was getting this presentation ready, there are some changes that I made, being more intentional about staying off of social media, being more intentional about keeping my phone in the other room or turned off. And then my husband and I have had discussions about chores with our children and making sure every day there's something that we're giving to them, increasing the amount of responsibility and then the amount of accomplishments that they have. So if you're a parent, you've been given a tremendous responsibility and tremendous blessing. And now we have the chance to shape responsibility within our own children. We're not doing it alone. We don't have to pretend we have it figured out perfectly. We can point our kids to the one who did it perfectly as we do our best, and we ask for his guidance every step of the way. From Colossians 1, to this end I labor, striving with all his power, which works so powerfully within me. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love to answer any questions or hear your feedback.
I don't see any hands raised here yet. Does anyone have any questions or comments? We have a quiet group.
I was going to say when I do in-person presentations, I always kind of like hang out in the front after and people can talk to me one-on-one. So I'm fine just hanging out here a couple of minutes in case something comes to later.
Okay.
I don't have a drive back home like you guys do, so I'm happy to hang out.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very good, very lots of good ideas and information.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Like I mentioned, our schedules get really full and there's a lot of different ways we could spend our time. So it says a lot that you chose to be at a parenting presentation tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess there is nothing, so we'll sign off.
Okay, I know you have my email address.
Yes.
The presentation I did last week, I got an email a couple days later. Someone had a follow-up question, so I'm more than happy to, if things come up later or there's a private thing, shoot me an email and I'd love to talk through anything that stands out.
Okay.